Hey, what's up, everybody? Charles here, and we have made it to day 15 of the Diddy trial. And the testimony today is all about an angel. Turns out Diddy has an angel. And after today's testimony, he might feel like he needs one. The angel is a guy named Eddie Garcia. And he was front and center today on the stand. Eddie Garcia was a former supervisor of security at the Intercontinental Hotel here in Los Angeles. So yes, he was testifying all about the Cassie beating incident from 2016, and what was revealed today was exactly why this video of the beating went unnoticed, to the public at least, for 8 years. And it all has to do with $100,000 in a brown paper bag. So Eddie Garcia testified about how he first saw this video, how this incident with Diddy attacking Cassie came to his desk, as it were. He said that he came into work on March 5th of 2016, and he was told, now he was not there when the actual incident happened. Remember, this was early in the morning on March 5th at about 11 a.m. So he says he got to work at 2 p.m. and was told there was a domestic incident. He did not know that it involved Diddy or Cassie at that point, but he was told that there was video. So he is there at work, and he says about 90 minutes into his shift, he gets a phone call from a woman named Christina Coram. And she explained to Eddie that she was Diddy's assistant. We've heard other people refer to her as sort of his chief of staff, the person, everything goes through Christina. And what Eddie testified was that she said, did he know anything about this incident, and that it was very important that Diddy get this video. She wanted the video because Diddy had been, quote, intoxicated and didn't remember what happened. So you have him testifying to basically what Christina Coram, he says, was already starting to lay out, that yes, there had been this violent incident, but he was just so intoxicated, he doesn't even remember what happened. So obviously that's, Eddie would start to feel like, the way he said it, it was almost like, don't think that he's a monster. This was just a guy who was intoxicated, and she clearly knows what happened on the video at that point. And I would imagine that she is concerned that Mr. Garcia has seen this and has already made a judgment on Diddy. So they're trying to sort of blunt all that. But she made it clear that they wanted to get a copy of this video, that Diddy wanted to see it. And Eddie says he told her, you're gonna have to contact hotel management or get a subpoena. And he repeated that a couple of times to her, and she kept insisting that there's gotta be some way to get this video. He says later that night, he gets another call from a phone number that is a New York area code, and Christina is on the phone again, but this time she puts Diddy on with him. So this is bringing in the big guy, right? You got to bring in, one, the boss, two, the guy who's the big celebrity that is possibly going to convince Eddie that there's got to be a way to get this video. And Eddie Garcia then testifies about his conversation with Diddy, who he said was sort of encouraging him, saying, almost like a coach, like, come on, I know you can do this. I know you can get the video. I know you can do this for me. And he said, look, you sound like a nice guy. I can tell that you want to help. Come on, man, you can do this. So Garcia said he was concerned that that Diddy was making it clear to him, to Eddie Garcia, that he was very concerned this video would get out and that it would ruin his career. That's a quote, that it would ruin his career. That was Diddy's concern, and obviously we all seen the video, we know why he would feel that way. So Eddie Garcia says that he told Diddy, look, I'm gonna have to talk to my manager. And he said that Diddy said to him, look, if you do this, I can take care of you. And Eddie Garcia says it was his understanding when Diddy said that it meant financially in some way. So Eddie tells Diddy, look, I'm gonna have to talk to my boss. Eddie was a supervisor. There was a head of security at the hotel, a guy named Bill Medrano. So Eddie testified that he went and spoke to Bill about this. He said, I had a conversation with Diddy, with his people. They want this video. They want a copy of the video, and then they want us to destroy the video. And Eddie testified that Bill said, okay, we can do that for $50,000. Well, Eddie goes back and delivers this news to Christina Coram, and Diddy gets on the phone and is thrilled about this news and says, $50,000, we can do that. In fact, this is the quote. He said, Eddie says, Diddy replied, Eddie, my angel, I knew you could help. I knew you could do it. Big pat on the back. He's excited. Eddie testified that Diddy sounded happy, sounded excited, and just wanted to know how fast he could get the video to him. So he did that. Eddie goes to his boss. His boss hands him a thumb drive, and he goes to deliver the thumb drive to Diddy. And he describes the scene that really sounds like a back room of a mob meeting. But he says this was in a high-rise building, and he goes in, and in the room, they have an agreement for him to sign, for Eddie to sign, and it basically says, this is an NDA, you can't talk about this, you are guaranteeing us that this is the only copy of this video that you're giving us, and if there's any breach of this, and we find out later that there's another copy, or that you've spoken about it, you're gonna owe us $1 million. Keep in mind that Eddie Garcia was 24 years old at the time and earning $10.50 an hour. So seeing something that is threatening you with having to pay $1 million would be kind of threatening at that point. But he gives him the thumb drive. He sees Diddy take out $100,000, not Diddy, but he sees $100,000 come out of a brown paper bag, and then it goes into one of those money counters that we all see when you go to the bank. You also see it a lot in movies, in mob movies. Counts out $100,000. Now, Eddie says he kind of figured that since the agreed upon number was $50,000 that was gonna go to his boss, Bill Medrano, he just figured the other $50,000 was for him. And he ends up keeping $30,000 for himself. He admits that he bought a car with that money, and another $20,000 he gave to another security officer who was on duty at the time. What's interesting is, if you remember in the video, once in the trial they played the full video where we got to see the security guard who showed up and actually interacted with Diddy and with Cassie and broke things up. His name was Flores, and Mr. Flores did not take any of this money. As Eddie Garcia described it, he said Flores was pretty much a straight arrow. He was not the type of guy who would go for getting money to be silenced on anything. So he did not get the money. And in fact, Flores has gone on to is now an LAPD officer. So Flores doesn't get the money. The other three guys split up $100,000, and Diddy gets this thumb drive. Now, the thing that wasn't answered today, and I think I really hope that they get around to this. How did the video get out? We still don't know that. Like, how did the government end up with this video? Somebody clearly had a copy of it. CNN, we know the video that they had was shot off of a monitor, but somehow the government, because we saw it in the trial, they got the actual hard drive video of this. So that means someone else had a copy besides that thumb drive that Diddy got. We don't know yet, but that's gonna be interesting. I hope that eventually comes out. But we're asking about winners and losers today, and that's what we do every day, right? We go through all of this and try to assess who won today. On the one hand, you could say, if you're the defense, you go, yeah, they brought up all this, they brought up the fact that we paid for it, but the reality you gotta remember is that them paying these individuals, not law enforcement, not government officials, paying just citizens for silence and having them sign an NDA, that's not a crime. They didn't break any laws there. So if you're the defense, you go like, okay, so we paid money for something. They may be thinking they won. I don't think so. I think the prosecution wins today, and here's why. Although it wasn't a crime to pay this $100,000, which, by the way, the agreed upon number is $50,000, but then you gave $100,000, that certainly has an appearance of, I'm a rich, powerful person, and I can pay money when I need to silence people. I can pay money to make videos, photos, whatever, go away. That's how I operate. And that was the government's point in raising all of this today, was to get down to the nitty-gritty of this video, which everyone wondered, how in the world did we not know about this when there were more than a handful of people who probably saw this video at some point? How did it not ever get out? We now know the answer to that, and that answer does not look good for Diddy as far as his character.
Derek Ferguson was called by federal prosecutors, I think, to help walk them through all of the money that Sean Combs had at his disposal, and then how some of it worked, including how they handled cash, like, say, $100,000 to pay for video, and how they handled reimbursements on corporate credit cards. Because remember, Eva, a number of assistants testified they would buy supplies for the freak-offs with their corporate card and then get reimbursed. But Derek Ferguson also said one other critical thing. He talked about wire transfers from 2011 of $20,000. And that's a payment that Cassie Ventura's mother said Sean Combs demanded to recoup money that he had spent on Cassie Ventura. Combs, remember, was upset that Ventura began dating rapper Kid Cudi. The jury saw the wire transfers, the $20,000 in from Cassie Ventura's dad, and it being returned 4 days later.
Ferguson worked for Combs for some 20 years. Did the two have any interactions in court today?
They did. Sean Combs seemed to nod and smile at him, and maybe Derek Ferguson gave him a bit of a tentative hello back. But he worked for the defense also because, in effect, they were able to launder Combs' image through the pedigree of Derek Ferguson. Went to Stuyvesant High School, grew up in the Bronx, Harvard Business School. And the impression the defense was hoping to leave the jury was, here's a legitimate businessman protecting Combs from any shenanigans that the federal prosecutors might be talking about as a criminal enterprise.
Also, I have to ask you, Aaron, we heard there may have been some sort of outburst in the courtroom this morning. What happened?
Yeah, this was before any testimony got underway. There's been a woman kind of loitering outside, heckling a number of the reporters, and then she's gotten inside a couple of times, and in court, she began to just make a scene. She started yelling about the treatment of Sean Combs, and eventually court security officers took, I think, 3 of them to lead her from the room, and Sean Combs saw the whole thing.
Aaron Katersky for us there at the federal courthouse. Aaron, thank you so much. Now to break down today's testimony, let's bring in ABC News legal contributor Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, you were there in court today. What stood out to you about everything that you heard?
I mean, other than I think Aaron called them shenanigans about what happened in the beginning, what stood out to me was just Eddie Garcia's testimony, walking us through this very riveting piece of testimony that almost was reminiscent of Kid Cudi talking about that Marvel supervillain, of Sean Combs allegedly in the room with a brown paper bag, counting money, $10,000 at a time, and just the whole kind of story of it all, of hearing how this all worked out. And the defense didn't necessarily push back on that narrative, but focus instead on other areas in the cross-examination. But that was very riveting to listen to how this video didn't make it to the light of day until some years later.
Eddie Garcia was granted immunity ahead of his testimony. This is the second time we've seen this in this trial. What did he say that he needed immunity from? I mean, just really quickly, accepting bribes, tax evasion, obstruction. This is an individual who is testifying very truthfully, at least if you believe his testimony, and it came off pretty credible, that he accepted $100,000 from Sean Combs. 50 of it went to his manager, 20 went to another associate of his, and then 30 went to him, and then he took that money and bought a used vehicle with it. Because of course, Sean Combs said, don't spend it all in one place. We don't want to raise suspicions. This, don't forget, is a 24-year-old
at the time, who's just a new security guard. And so that's what he's testifying their immunity. He doesn't want to testify to allegations of a crime and then be prosecuted for it. But again, the government wants his testimony to be able to convict, or at least try to convict, Sean Combs.
Yeah, and Garcia talked about how he got paid for the hotel video. He mentioned Christina Coram. Who is she?
So Christina Coram is Sean Combs' chief of staff. If you want to even go further back, in Rodney Jones's civil lawsuit, he describes her as the Ghislaine Maxwell to this whole criminal enterprise. And a few times we hear her name in this testimony, and we heard it in a lot of other witnesses as well. But she's supposedly the one that is speaking on the phone first when she reaches out to Eddie Garcia, trying to convince him to get the video, and then gives the phone to Sean Combs when it's really trying to push it over the finish line of trying to get that video. And then even when that money's getting counted, she's in and out of there, walking back and forth, kind of participating in this to some degree, allegedly.
We should also note that Coram has denied all allegations. We also have to talk about Sean Combs' CFO took the stand today. We were talking a lot about money today. Was there a money trail? What did it tell us?
So Derek Ferguson broke down how this enterprise, a legitimate business by his definition, had money coming in and out, who had Amex cards, who did not, how petty cash has moved around. But again, Aaron Kotursky mentioned this. We saw this $20,000 first going to Cassie Ventura, and then money coming in on December 23rd. If you remember, Cassie's mother testified that she had to get a bank equity loan to pay Sean Combs. And then on December 27th, 4 days later, we have a return of funds, money being transferred from an account that belongs to Sean Combs out of that account. That, I think, connects with the allegations earlier on. Don't forget this money movement. There are 5 charges that Sean Combs is facing, the top one being racketeering and conspiracy. And when we talk about the activities within this enterprise, this is what the government is trying to argue is this criminal enterprise, this movement of money that is disguised as legitimate business deals, but is a coordinated effort on multiple people to repeatedly earn a profit.
And later this week, we're expecting to hear from a witness who's going to be going by the pseudonym Jane. They're going to take the stand. Do we have any idea what she's going to say?
Jane is expected to be potentially the last alleged victim to testify, because we've heard that victim number 3 may not come forward. We heard some of the potential testimony from the opening statements. Jane, very similar to Cassie, dated Sean Combs for about 2020 to 2024, same allegations of drug use, freak-offs, and force, fraud, and coercion.
All right, Brian Buckmeyer, thank you so much. Still ahead, the hotel employee on the stand today telling the jury the lengths Sean Combs allegedly went to trying to get that infamous video of the music mogul assaulting Cassie Ventura. Also coming up, the so-called hip-hop cop takes us back to the 90s and inside one of the rap rivalries that has helped define hip-hop. An employee at the Intercontinental Hotel and the former chief financial officer of Combs Enterprises. Time now to examine the key legal strategies that we saw playing out in court today. We have Brian Buckmeyer playing the defense, Bernardo Villalona playing prosecutor. Bernardo, we're going to start with you. We got to talk about that video, the 2016 hotel video. Today we learned how Combs allegedly was able to get it. What do you think of it all?
Eva, today was pure bombshells. I mean, when I talk about riveting testimony, inside of that courtroom, you can hear a pin drop when Eddie Garcia was actually testifying. I think what shocked us the most, and I think what did Diddy in, was the fact that it was Sean Combs who directly called the security guy to try to get that video. Not just one time, not just 2 times, but multiple times. And then to take it a step further, he's the one who meets with the security guy and actually gets the USB from him. And actually, he's the one who gives the money to the security guy. So before we were thinking, oh, it's probably one of Sean Combs' employees, or maybe it was security that works for him, or maybe KK. No, Sean Combs was directly involved in arranging for this payoff and to get that thumb drive. And he knew what was going on was actually wrong.
Brian?
I mean, how did he know what was going on was wrong?
Because he said it will ruin his career. It could ruin his actual career going to that extent.
Think about every person in Sean Combs' life. And this, I think, this is a spin the defense has to argue here. Everyone that's a celebrity, if we had bad press on us and we're nowhere close to Diddy, it could ruin our career. So I think what the defense is going to position here is this about controlling and furthering a criminal enterprise, or is this about protecting a celebrity's image? Because a celebrity, if his dirty drawers are outside on the street, that could destroy his reputation.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then get your other people to do it. Get legal to do it. Get your security to do it. Your chief of staff to do it. But he said, this is so important to me that I am going to handle this.
He's a control freak. And I think the other thing the defense is raising too is in the NDA, NDA, I think it's a bit of a stretch, but an argument nonetheless, you'll see who's gonna bite, is that in the NDA, the only argument, is this about bribing a witness? And what they're saying is the NDA does not inhibit the person from testifying in front of the jury, testifying in front of the government, testifying if the law enforcement asks.
Yeah, but the crime was already done before they even signed the NDA, because he got into conversations with them and says, look, I need to get that tape. I need to make sure it is the only copy. It cannot get out there.
But it wasn't the only copy.
Well, he thought it was the only copy. That's the issue. He thought it was the only copy. Had it been the only copy, we wouldn't be here today.
Okay, so one of the other points that the defense raised was that police didn't come to the hotel, that Garcia said he spoke to Cassie about it all, and he said she told him, quote, she had a movie coming out and it wasn't a good time for this to come out and she wanted it to go away. Bernardo, her not appearing to want to report this, does that factor at all in here?
So it does factor into it, but remember, we had the testimony, the prosecution put on that expert, Dr. Hughes, to testify about why a person who's been a victim of domestic violence, been a victim of being beaten by their partner, why they wouldn't want to come forward and to cooperate, that it takes many times before they finally report it or actually decide that they want to leave this relationship. And in the end, regardless whether she wanted to report it or not, because we have that visual that everyone has seen of Sean Combs beating her, there's no way around it.
Brian, you're being so quiet today.
I'm trying my best. No, because all this is yes. Is that the application of it? Sure. But also, she is a celebrity in her own right as well. Does she want this press out there? There's also the aspect of Sean Combs is protecting not only his image, he's also protecting that of the artist that he has. And so the defense is going to make the argument here is this is not, again, about a criminal enterprise. Is this bad? Yes. The defense has already given that up. This is a bad look all around. This is domestic violence, but this isn't a criminal enterprise. This isn't furthering free costs. This is about a legitimate business of having an enterprise, a music artist, having a business, whatever it may be, and protecting that from the public.
Well, the main point that you got from today is the obstruction of justice for the racketeering conspiracy. So you got 2 points today: obstruction of justice and that there was a criminal enterprise, in the sense that you put KK Security and Sean Combs all in one room. That's
only if you try to call this as a crime and not as a business of trying to protect the people from bad press.
But that's what the prosecutor, when you start piling on all these different instances, it's not just one unique one-off. We're talking about multiple occasions of crimes taking place that ultimately is going to add up and all be this big criminal enterprise.
I'm talking about trying to hide information from the public. Yes, freak offs, those are also aspects of this criminal enterprise, but keeping information from the public. Are you sure beyond a reasonable doubt that he's keeping information from the public to hide a criminal enterprise or to hide bad press so that they can still do their business?
It's a combination of all of it.
Okay,
you need all of it.
So, okay, we'll have to wait and see how that all shakes out, right? But tomorrow we do know that we're gonna have a forensic video expert who's gonna take the stand.
Yes.
Why are you looking like that?
Oh, because Bernard knows something about this expert.
So this expert who is testifying, Frank Piazza, he's testifying for the government. I've had the unique experience that when I was a prosecutor, I cross-examined him, and a judge did not consider that he was qualified to be an expert on the exact matter that he is testifying for the government tomorrow as an expert. So he has been questioned as to his abilities and his actual opinion. So we'll see where the defense goes in terms of cross-examining him, but he's not the prestigious expert that many people will think of him, if they're able to get that cross-examination.
The video's still coming in. I know we're switching.
The video's coming in.
I know we're switching a little. I might be talking to the prosecutor.
The video's coming in. The video's coming in. Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys both. It's always fun talking to you too. Thank you so much for about just that in the sex trafficking and racketeering conspiracy trial against Sean Diddy Combs. A hotel employee testifying under immunity, telling the jury Combs gave him over $100,000 cash for the 2016 surveillance footage that shows the hip-hop mogul attacking then-girlfriend.
Let's get some perspective now from our powerhouse legal team. We have trial attorney Monique Presley, who used to represent Bill Cosby. Jim Trusty, former chief of the DOJ's organized crime and gang section. He used to represent President Donald Trump. and Shan Wu, defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. Great to be with all of you. First to you, Shan. So Mia has been questioned for 3 days now, virtually the same amount of time that we saw Cassie Ventura on the stand for. What impact do you think she's going to have on the outcome of this trial?
Well, I think the reason you're seeing her up there for such a long time is because it shows what kind of impact she could potentially have on it. Like Ventura, she's also being presented as a witness who was also victimized here. And so that's a very important piece of foundation for the prosecution to lay. They still have a lot of stuff to tie together, but they have to get this evidence out there. And I think from the sounds of it, it's been awfully compelling testimony.
Compelling testimony that does overlap with some of the allegations of physical and sexual abuse that we've heard previously. Is there a risk that the prosecution is overlapping too much?
There's a risk in cases like this where the prosecution really has to be careful that the more impactful, even salacious testimony doesn't go past the point of being probative versus prejudice, which can solve a lot of problems for you on appeal if you get the conviction. A little hard to say. I mean, you're seeing objections from both sides a lot today. I think today's objections were more the prosecution was trying to make a point to the jury that defense was kind of being bullying towards the victim. But they do have to be careful with that, and they have to really stay in the focus zone of making sure all this very impactful, compelling evidence gets tied to the elements of the charges.
Can I say something about those objections?
Please.
You know, just it's a bit of trial advocacy, I suppose. You know, it is a difficult spot in front of a jury to have somebody on the other side who you feel is drawing you into constant objections. Because in a sense, if you keep objecting, you're highlighting that they're scoring points. Sometimes the jury takes it the opposite way, like you're obstructing a logical course of questioning. So it's a real art to figure out, when do I just sit down and let it play out, when do I not? What I'm hearing from the report is that the judge is not being a particular activist about shutting down the defense cross. If that's the case, you got to read the room as a prosecutor and wait for just a few times where it's really critical to object. So I think that's an interesting kind of game within the game that's going on. The other thing I just want to mention real quick, you know, assault and sexual assault are not predicate crimes for RICO. This is charged as a racketeering, influence, corrupt organization, the entity being all of Sean Combs's businesses and himself. So it's legally permissible, but kind of factually tricky. I think what this is building to, believe it or not, is a witness that's not a victim. It's building towards an expert on human trafficking and sex trafficking to explain why someone like Mia would stick around, why Mia would still have this misplaced allegiance years later. And they're going to put it in the context of the psychological control that happens in human trafficking cases. So I think that's going to be a real interesting battle down the road, is who comes in to tie these crimes together that are not actual RICO predicates, but will come together as a human trafficking or sexual trafficking predicate.
The force aspect of violence does go to the forced sex trafficking too, so they kind of have that outlet.
Right, but not the assault, not the rape per se. It's got to be, you know, part of the bigger picture.
Monique,
and the sex trafficking depends on whom the victim is actually supposed to be for the sex trafficking. They spent the first few weeks of this case saying that it was Ms. Ventura, when to me that was always kind of obvious that there were others who they could probably get a better case out of. But I agree. Where's the beef is what we're going to need to know. If they're trying to use the expert that you think that they're going to use, I think that's a huge problem, because they're trying to put, again, someone on the stand to explain why people did things that they haven't evaluated, that they who they weren't treating. It's the same thing as the prior expert that they had, who tried to explain why Ms. Ventura would do things or not do things when she hadn't spent a day treating her, hadn't done an evaluation of her. That's highly unreliable, and juries are not dumb.
Okay, on that I would disagree with you. I just say on the expert, because I've actually was one of the first prosecutors in DC to use a domestic violence expert. As long as the expert isn't opining on the ultimate issue, saying this was, you know, wrong legally, I think it gives you a very good framework as a prosecutor to fit in the behavior of the witnesses and possibly explain this question of why didn't you report earlier.
it's fascinating to see the prosecution and someone with prosecutorial experience take one side and the defense take the other. I wonder what you make of what Jim was describing about the difficulty in pushing a RICO case forward. You have cell phones being stolen, you have cars being tracked, allegations of which. Does that not rise to the level of coercion, and does that not get them closer to a RICO case?
right now it's all kind of sounding like throw everything against the wall and see how much you can get to stick. It's not coming out like some organized common scheme or plan. It's not sounding, I mean, RICO cases are hard to prove anyway. And when you have a circumstance like this where a jury may very well be looking and thinking the domestic violence is horrible, this is not anybody's great guy. They may detest the defendant, but they may not see that as the same thing as a criminal enterprise. They may think this is a horrible domestic violence relationship and that this is a person who was a cruel boss. And those two things can be true without there being a RICO at the end of the line.
True, but a very challenging closing argument for a defense attorney, because you've got, by that point, there may be this critical mass of people being dangled out windows, sexual assaults, obstruction, horrible things. You get to a point, you stand up in closing and you go, yeah, that's kind of all true, but it doesn't add up to a RICO. That's a tough argument. Doesn't mean it's not, it's available for sure. We're going to hear it for sure. But it's a tough fight by that point of the trial for the jury to disconnect.
And it depends on your jury. It depends on how many people they've dangled out of windows, how many times they've been obsessed lovers who are running down the middle of the street trying to keep their wife from leaving.
That's
you have to figure out who you have as a jury in order to know what they're going to be thinking.
You ask questions during jury selection, how many of you have dangled somebody out the window?
Yeah, and they answer honestly.
I do wonder what you all made.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Charles here, and we have made it to day 15 of the Diddy trial. And the testimony today is all about an angel. Turns out Diddy has an angel. And after today's testimony, he might feel like he needs one. The angel is a guy named Eddie Garcia. And he was front and center today on the stand. Eddie Garcia was a former supervisor of security at the Intercontinental Hotel here in Los Angeles. So yes, he was testifying all about the Cassie beating incident from 2016. And what was revealed today was exactly why this video of the beating went unnoticed, to the public at least, for 8 years. And it all has to do with $100,000 in a brown paper bag. So Eddie Garcia testified about how he first saw this video, how this incident with Diddy attacking Cassie came to his desk, as it were. He said that he came into work on March 5th of 2016, and he was told, now he was not there when the actual incident happened. Remember, this was early in the morning on March 5th at about 11 a.m. So he says he got to work at 2 p.m. and was told there was a domestic incident. He did not know that it involved Diddy or Cassie at that point, but he was told that there was video. So he is there at work, and he says about 90 minutes into his shift, he gets a phone call from a woman named Christina Coram. And she explained to Eddie that she was Diddy's assistant. We've heard other people refer to her as sort of his chief of staff, the person, everything goes through Christina. And what Eddie testified was that she said, did he know anything about this incident, and that it was very important that Diddy get this video. She wanted the video because Diddy had been, quote, intoxicated and didn't remember what happened. So you have him testifying to basically what Christina Coram, he says, was already starting to lay out, that yes, there had been this violent incident, but he was just so intoxicated, he doesn't even remember what happened. So obviously that's, Eddie would start to feel like, the way he said it, it was almost like, don't think that he's a monster. This was just a guy who was intoxicated, and she clearly knows what happened on the video at that point. And I would imagine that she is concerned that Mr. Garcia has seen this and has already made a judgment on Diddy. So they're trying to sort of blunt all that. But she made it clear that they wanted to get a copy of this video, that Diddy wanted to see it. And Eddie says he told her, you're gonna have to contact hotel management or get a subpoena. And he repeated that a couple of times to her, and she kept insisting that there's got to be some way to get this video. He says later that night he gets another call from a phone number that is a New York area code, and Christina is on the phone again, but this time she puts Diddy on with him. So this is bringing in the big guy, right? You got to bring in, one, the boss, two, the guy who's the big celebrity that is possibly going to convince Eddie that there's got to be a way to get this video. And Eddie Garcia then testifies about his conversation with Diddy, who he said was sort of encouraging him, saying, almost like a coach, like, come on, I know you can do this. I know you can get the video. I know you can do this for me. And he said, look, you sound like a nice guy. I can tell that you want to help. Come on, man, you can do this. So Garcia said he was concerned that that Diddy was making it clear to him, to Eddie Garcia, that he was very concerned this video would get out and that it would ruin his career. That's a quote, that it would ruin his career. That was Diddy's concern, and obviously we all seen the video, we know why he would feel that way. So Eddie Garcia says that he told Diddy, look, I'm gonna have to talk to my manager. And he said that Diddy said to him, look, if you do this, I can take care of you. And Eddie Garcia says it was his understanding when Diddy said that it meant financially in some way. So Eddie tells Diddy, look, I'm gonna have to talk to my boss. Eddie was a supervisor. There was a head of security at the hotel, a guy named Bill Medrano. So Eddie testified that he went and spoke to Bill about this. He said, I had a conversation with Diddy, with his people. They want this video. They want a copy of the video, and then they want us to destroy the video. And Eddie testified that Bill said, okay, we can do that for $50,000. Well, Eddie goes back and delivers this news to Christina Coram, and Diddy gets on the phone and is thrilled about this news, and says, $50,000, we can do that. In fact, this is the quote. He said, Eddie says, Diddy replied, Eddie, my angel, I knew you could help. I knew you could do it. Big pat on the back. He's excited. Eddie testified that Diddy sounded happy, sounded excited, and just wanted to know how fast he could get the video to him. So he did that. Eddie goes to his boss. His boss hands him a thumb drive, and he goes to deliver the thumb drive to Diddy. And he describes the scene that really sounds like a back room of a mob meeting. But he says this was in a high-rise building, and he goes in, and in the room, they have an agreement for him to sign, for Eddie to sign, and it basically says, this is an NDA, you can't talk about this, you are guaranteeing us that this is the only copy of this video that you're giving us, and if there's any breach of this, and we find out later that there's another copy, or that you've spoken about it, you're gonna owe us $1 million. Keep in mind that Eddie Garcia was 24 years old at the time and earning $10.50 an hour. So seeing something that is threatening you with having to pay $1 million would be kind of threatening at that point. But he gives him the thumb drive. He sees Diddy take out $100,000, not Diddy, but he sees $100,000 come out of a brown paper bag, and then it goes into one of those money counters that we all see when you go to the bank. You also see it a lot in movies, in mob movies. Counts out $100,000. Now, Eddie says he kind of figured that since the agreed upon number was $50,000 that was gonna go to his boss, Bill Medrano, he just figured the other $50,000 was for him. And he ends up keeping $30,000 for himself. He admits that he bought a car with that money, and another $20,000 he gave to another security officer who was on duty at the time. What's interesting is, if you remember in the video, once in the trial they played the full video where we got to see the security guard who showed up and actually interacted with Diddy and with Cassie and broke things up. His name was Flores, and Mr. Flores did not take any of this money. As Eddie Garcia described it, he said Flores was pretty much a straight arrow. He was not the type of guy who would go for getting money to be silenced on anything. So he did not get the money. And in fact, Flores has gone on to is now an LAPD officer. So Flores doesn't get the money. The other three guys split up $100,000, and Diddy gets this thumb drive. Now, the thing that wasn't answered today, and I think I really hope that they get around to this. How did the video get out? We still don't know that. Like, how did the government end up with this video? Somebody clearly had a copy of it. CNN, we know the video that they had was shot off of a monitor, but somehow the government, because we saw it in the trial, they got the actual hard drive video of this. So that means someone else had a copy besides that thumb drive that Diddy got. We don't know yet, but that's going to be interesting. I hope that eventually comes out. But we're asking about winners and losers today, and that's what we do every day, right? We go through all of this and try to assess who won today. On the one hand, you could say, if you're the defense, you go, yeah, they brought up all this. They brought up the fact that we paid for it. But the reality you got to remember is that them paying these individuals, not law enforcement, not government officials, paying just citizens for silence and having them sign an NDA, that's not a crime. They didn't break any laws there. So if you're the defense, you go like, okay, so we paid money for something. They may be thinking they won. I don't think so. I think the prosecution wins today, and here's why. Although it wasn't a crime to pay this $100,000, which, by the way, the agreed upon number is $50,000, but then you gave $100,000, that certainly has an appearance of, I'm a rich, powerful person, and I can pay money when I need to silence people. I can pay money to make videos, photos, whatever, go away. That's how I operate. And that was the government's point in raising all of this today, was to get down to the nitty-gritty of this video, which everyone wondered, how in the world did we not know about this when there were more than a handful of people who probably saw this video at some point? How did it not ever get out? We now know the answer to that, and that answer does not look good for Diddy as far as his character. It doesn't point directly to any of the counts against him, not yet. And we'll see if the government can close that loop and make it connect it to.
Today was day 15 in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, and a former security guard from the Intercontinental Hotel testified that he and other security guards were bribed to the tune of $100,000. But wait, Diddy is not being charged with bribery. What is the connection between all this extensive testimony of bribery and the charges he's actually facing? Is the prosecution finally making its case? I'm criminal defense attorney Sarah Azari, and here on Serving Justice, we're going to take a deep dive into what happened in court today. I want to bring in Safiya Sami Ali, News Nation reporter who's been all over this case, and also News Nation field producer Gentrick Shanga, who's at the Manhattan courthouse watching all of this unfold. So, Safiya, I want to go to you first. What did we learn from the testimony of this security guard today?
We learned that he took a bribe, essentially, and that it was huge. This was one of the predicate acts that, we've been talking about from the beginning for the racketeering charge. He testified that Diddy's chief of staff at the time reached out to him. He spoke to Diddy personally. They reached out to him on his personal phone to try to get this video of him allegedly assaulting Cassie in the hotel hallway. And he basically walked the jury through exactly how it happened, how they reached out, how they asked several times, the deal they struck, how he transferred the USB over to Diddy and his staff, and basically was taken care of, was given $100,000 to be split between three hotel employees.
Right, and he was saved in the chief of staff's phone as my angel Eddie, right? Because that's what Combs was referring to him at, essentially having us back and burying this video. Yeah, it's bad. it also goes to the means and methods of the enterprise, how they were silencing people and essentially obstructing justice so that they wouldn't be caught. There was, interestingly, Gentrix, I know you remember this because we talked about this outside the courthouse. Remember, there was another hotel security guard that testified early on that he said he was offered some cash, he didn't take it, but he assumed it was a bribe. And of course, that was challenged by the defense on cross-examination. That was sort of a assumption that it was a bribe, because the guy didn't know how much was in there. Was it really a bribe, or was it for the damages caused to the hotel room? But now today, we actually had a legit bribe that was received and distributed, right?
Exactly, and the pieces are all kind of coming together now, because we were wondering, why does this security guard need immunity? Why is he pleading the fifth? And so we learn, actually, and he said it himself, that Israel Flores, that was the other security guard who did not take the stack of cash that he said went from his thumb to his pinky from Combs. And we learned that from this security guard that Flores, he was very straight-laced, very by the book, he called it. That's why they brought in another security guard, into this whole bribery scheme to kind of go along with it. So that was really fascinating to see that he knew that his coworker Israel was not about it, but he got the green light from his boss to say, hey, I'll take $50K, and he goes there.
Good evening, I'm Mike Marza. As we take a look back at another day of testimony in the trial of Sean Diddy Combs. The focus of the trial returned today to that infamous video of Combs beating his ex-girlfriend Cassie in a hotel in Los Angeles. A hotel security supervisor in LA testified that Combs paid him $100,000 for he and two other employees to keep the video quiet and hand over the thumb drive. And then there was a chaotic moment in the courtroom early in the day. A woman had to be tossed out of the room after screaming at Combs. In just a moment, we're going to be joined again by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona to dig deeper into everything that unfolded in court. But first up, here's Darla Miles with a recap from Lower Manhattan.
It was Christina Coram, longtime personal assistant to Sean Diddy Combs, who reached out to the security office at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles to keep the March 2016 Cassie beating video out of the public domain. Eddie Garcia, one of the guards, testifying after pleading the fifth and being granted immunity Tuesday morning that he and two co-workers accepted a payoff from Combs for a copy of the video and to delete it from the cloud. Mr. Combs sounded nervous. He was talking really fast, that he had too much to drink, and that I knew how things was with women when one thing led to another. He asked if I could provide the video. He stated that I sounded like a good guy and sounded like I wanted to help. He said something like this could ruin him. I told him that I talked to my boss and that he would do it for $50,000. He sounded excited. He said, "Eddie, my angel, I knew you could help. I knew you could do it." Garcia telling the court Combs wanted a copy of their IDs, saying Combs told them this only works if we're all on the same page, and that they'd have to pay $1 million in damages if they breached the agreement. Also on the stand Tuesday, Derek Ferguson, a former CFO of Bad Boy Entertainment. Prosecutors explaining the company's financial structure to jurors, some yawning during his testimony. During cross-examination, Ferguson saying, "We were building companies from scratch. We all felt the mission. We all felt the need to be great." He set high, aggressive goals. His work ethic pushed the team. Defense attorneys for Combs asking, "Did you see anyone help Sean Combs commit crimes?" Ferguson answering no. "Did you see anyone enhance Mr. Combs' reputation or the reputation of any business through emotional, physical, or sexual abuse?" Ferguson answering, "I did not." "Did you see anyone enhance Mr. Combs' reputation or the reputation of any business through acts of prostitution?" Ferguson again answering no. But when defense attorneys asked, "You're testifying at his criminal trial today. Do you think highly of Mr. Combs?" Ferguson taking a very long pause, answering, "I don't know how to answer that." Now, testimony will resume tomorrow morning again at 9:30. At some point tomorrow, perhaps tomorrow afternoon, the third alleged victim in this case should be testifying under the name Jane Doe. And it's important to note that the anonymity of these alleged victims is very important to the court. This morning, federal prosecutors reported to the judge that they overheard a streamer outside court yesterday broadcasting the real name of Mia. The court said they're taking that seriously, and that particular streamer perhaps banned from the courtroom for the rest of this trial.
Our thanks to Darla Miles. Of course, that is the modern struggle that these courts have to deal with. It's one thing for trustworthy entities like ABC News and ABC 7. These streamers are a whole different deal. So it'll be interesting to see how the court deals with that. Let's go back to Mr. Garcia's testimony, because as you know here, we're joined by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona. So this is an important piece of testimony. Now, when you think about a security guard at a hotel, as part of this whole case, you may not think much about it. But what did his testimony do for the prosecution today?
So definitely we can see the value for the prosecution of granting him immunity. So remember, yesterday he was granted immunity, meaning that any crime that he testifies about, that he wouldn't be prosecuted for it unless he commits perjury while testifying. So this was crucial evidence for the prosecution in the sense of trying to prove the racketeering conspiracy, in the sense of trying to prove obstruction of justice, because Eddie Garcia, my angel, brought out that crucial evidence where Sean Combs was directly involved with trying to get rid of and wipe any evidence having to deal with this video that depicted him of committing a crime. So to hear that coming from a witness, an outsider, not someone within Diddy's camp, I think was riveting. When you were in that courtroom, you can hear a pin drop as all of us were hanging at his every word to see, oh my God, I can't believe Sean Combs was directly involved. Because you would have thought that it would have been maybe his security, maybe someone, a part of his staff. But here you had Sean Combs directly making phone calls and talking to this security officer, and also meeting with the security officer and handing him the money, and also kind of making a threat by saying, let me see your identification, let me get the identifications of the other two officers. And he made a copy of it for his own records, because what's the damage there, right? What's the threat?
The backstory too, again, as you're seeing this video, it is graphic, and this is Cassie Ventura, and Sean Combs has admitted what happened in this video.
Yes.
So we can say this is Sean Combs assaulting Cassie Ventura at a hotel in Los Angeles in 2016 after what is alleged by prosecutors was a freak-off, one of these sexual endeavors that has become the center and the focus of this investigation. How is Mr. Garcia on the stand, and how was the jury viewing what he was saying?
Oh, so Mr. Garcia, he was very cooperative with the prosecution. So even though he got immunity, sometimes when you give witnesses immunity, they can be a bit combative with prosecutors. But Mr. Garcia wasn't combative at all. Whatever questions were asked of him by the prosecution or the defense, he was very well open in stating this is what happened. And he has a vivid memory of everything that happened. So while this was, almost 10 years ago, he remembers the conversation, he remembers the order of things, he remembers the multiple phone calls and who reached out to him, especially the timing of when they reached out to him. So let me tell you, Mike, when the incident happened, he was not working. When this whole tape happened, the assault on Cassie happened, he wasn't working. He came in later on that day. And from the moment that he came in, he was getting calls, and the call was coming from the chief of staff of Sean Combs asking about this video. And he was trying to abide and say, like, look, I don't have the authority to give that information to you. You'll have to reach out to my boss or get a subpoena for it. I can't just give it to you. But KK, she was insistent. She was persistent with contacting him, to the point where ultimately where Mr. Garcia broke was when he got a call on his personal cell phone while he was at home. And talking to KK, like, look, I really need this. My client really needs to talk to you. It's really important to him.
And so how does this tie into what Sean Combs is actually charged with?
So it ties into it in the sense of it tells a story and gives us more insight as to the man that Sean Combs was during that time. But it ties into the racketeering conspiracy having to deal with the criminal enterprise, because the prosecutors wanted to use that KK, Sean Combs' chief of staff, was also doing Diddy's dirty work. And
showing enterprise.
Yes, and here you have KK making the phone calls, trying to get rid of this video, trying to assist Sean Combs, having him right next to her when she makes the initial call, and then giving it to Sean Combs, like, look, Mr. Someone wants to talk to you, and passes the phone to Sean Combs, and making this arrangement to try to get rid of this video. Also, the prosecution was keen in saying that security was also inside of that room when this arrangement was actually made. But again, the obstruction of justice, because you knew that a police investigation could have or was taking place, and that you had to get rid of this valuable piece of evidence. You got to think, this video speaks 1,000 words.
It showed.
You would have showed this video to law enforcement or to any court or to any judge, and maybe he would have been prosecuted in California, not now because the statute of limitation has expired, but back then. And Sean Combs knew the value of it.
So tough to watch. Let's talk about we've heard from Cassie Ventura. We've heard from a woman who went by the name Mia.
Yes.
Now we expect to hear from a woman who's going to go by Jane.
Yes.
How pivotal is this for the prosecution, and what do we expect to learn?
Jane, this is enormous for the prosecution, because when we talk about Cassie, we know Cassie is a part of the racketeer and conspiracy counts, but is also part of the sex trafficking as well as the transportation to engage in prostitution. Jane also has 2 counts on the indictment where she is the victim. So this proves half of the counts having to deal with Sean Combs being prosecuted. So it's very crucial. Again, we're going to hear similar conduct that we heard with Cassie. We're going to go back into the freak-off stage again. We're going to again hear about how these freak-offs took place, what transpired during these freak-offs, the violence that transpired, the escorts, you're going to hear about Jane also being viciously beaten inside of her home by Sean Combs. So again, we're going to revisit another version of what Cassie testified to. So again, this is really important for the prosecution. And Mike, as you know, there are strength in numbers. So when it was just Cassie, then you can just say it's just Cassie. But now you're talking about another woman that's testifying to similar acts.
It will be an interesting challenge for the defense, because you had Cassie Ventura, this 11-year relationship with Sean Combs at many points, and she testified that she was in love with him throughout that whole period, even though she alleges the violence.
Yes.
And we've seen the violence in alleging everything else that she testified to. I'm curious from the defense point of view, and this is more the logistics, because these stories are horrific and in many cases will be heartbroken if they are true, as they allege. But from the defense's point of view, as a legal sort of strategy, do they do anything differently that they did not do, differently than they did, I guess, for Cassie Ventura? Because there was a lot of criticism for the way that they handled the cross-examination.
I was just about to tell you, Mike, I hope they choose another attorney to do the cross-examination, because the attorney that did the cross-examination of Cassie, she was out of her league. She wasn't ready to do a cross-examination. And I think that was a major downfall in the defense of Sean Combs, is by having that attorney without the experience to be able to cross-examine a prime witness as Cassie. And now we have another prime star witness as Jane.
So important. We have about 45 seconds left, but something weird happened in the courtroom this morning. What was this?
Not weird. It was unsafe.
And you felt
oh my
concerned.
God. So I was in the main courtroom because it came out of nowhere. So everyone was on notice that there was a woman that was mentally unstable that would be entering the courtroom and sitting with the public. So we were already watching her, because we were actually taking bets as to when is she going to have this outburst. But she had an outburst talking about Sean Combs, that they're laughing, not taking this seriously. And all you heard from someone screaming, which was her, was like, oh, take your gun, or I want you to take your gun. I ducked because I was like thinking in my head, she's about to grab the gun. And I'm like, I'm not about to get shot for Diddy.
And so you did?
And she was dragged out of the courtroom by 3 court deputies. No, that doesn't do it justice. She was dragged. Wow. Like someone had to put their arm around her neck. Another one was pulling her arm. Another one was pulling her by her body, because she's also a big woman. So it took a while. She was very strong.
And then things calmed down and they were able to resume. And that was outside of the jury?
That was the good thing, thank God, that it wasn't in the presence of the jury.
Breaking news tonight. Diddy auctions his jailhouse clothes. Do his lawyers cost that much? Then he changed his approach. What happened?
Mia is still on the stand, finishing up her cross-examination by Brian Steele. Today, during a break, the government actually had to speak to the judge and say, look, the way that this witness is being treated by Mr. Steele is borderline hostile. He's being aggressive. He's yelling at her. He's accusing her of lying. And this type of questioning is going to prevent other witnesses from coming forward if they think they're going to be humiliated and treated like this. Now, the judge said, look, I have not heard Mr. Steele yell at the witness. I haven't heard him be too aggressive, but what I have heard is improper questions. And when Mr. Steele tries to rephrase these questions, the judge said he's not sure if he's doing it on purpose, not rephrasing properly just to get out what he's trying to say. But either way, he needs to watch it when it comes to that. And he said, look, the government can continue to object, and we'll make the adjustments accordingly. So as Brian Steele moved along with his cross-examination, it was a little bit aggressive. He did accuse Mia of lying. He would point blank ask her, were you lying when you said this? Were you not truthful when you said this? And Mia said, everything I've said in this courtroom has been truthful. And Brian Steele really seemed to hone in on the fact that, again, her text messages to Sean Combs 1 year after she didn't work for him, 2 years after, even up to 3 years after not working for him, they still said, I love you. They still said, I miss you. At one point, she texted him in 2019 that she had a dream that she was trapped in an elevator with R. Kelly and that Diddy came to rescue her. We found out through Brian Steele's cross-examination that Mia had met with the government about 27 times. The first 2 times meeting with the government, she did not mention any type of sexual assault or alleged sexual assault. And Mia said, well, I did not bring this up until I had my attorney. And Steele pointed out that she had an attorney in her March of 2024 meeting, but again, did not bring up the alleged sexual assault until June of 2024. And he was really trying to get in the name of her attorney, Sean Crowley, and the fact that Sean Crowley had won this big settlement prior to representing Mia. However, there were many objections and he was not able to get that in.
Okay. Did she crack, Lauren Collin, or did she stay strong? And I find it really interesting. They brought up that $400,000 settlement that she had with Diddy. Okay, what happened?
Mia actually said, everything I've said in this courtroom has been the truth and not a lie. And Brian Steele also said to her out of the blue and seemed to kind of raise his voice, well, isn't it true that he didn't touch you or violate you as many times as you've told us? And she said, again, everything I've said is true.
Okay, whoa. Okay, so he's asking, hey, he didn't you as many times as you're saying. Okay, straight out to Armand Wiggins, joining us out of LA, entertainment and legal fair commentator, host of podcast The Armand Wiggins Show, on the trial since day one. Did you hear what Lauren Collin just said? So Brian Steele, and I know him from the days that I was prosecuting felonies in inner city Atlanta. He's a great defense attorney. But wait, this is his message.
And finally, new rule, the Me Too movement, which turns 8 years old in October, needs an actual new rule, an amendment, if you will. Now, I'm sure with all the important world-changing news that's going on lately, very few of you have had time to pay attention to the P. Diddy trial going on in New York. I'm joking, of course. The moon could crash into the earth, and that trial would still be the first thing I'd click on, and I'm sure you're no different. I gotta say, this Diddy is a really hard guy to figure out. He's allegedly so jealous of Kid Cudi just dating Cassie that he firebombs his car, and it wasn't even a Tesla. But then he paid of him. Love is complicated. And that's where we must start. We need to keep 2 thoughts in our head at once. One, Diddy is a bad dude, really bad, like the worst thing in rap since Hammer Pants. A violent, sick fuck. I'm sorry, I mean an alleged violent, sick fuck. And we should lock him up and throw away the baby oil. And two, things have changed enough so that moving forward, the rule should be, if you're being abused, you gotta leave right away. Now, I completely understand why in the past women often did not do that. I understand, as counterintuitive as it seems, why an abused woman would send complimentary texts or emails to her abuser after the abuse. In an era where women felt for good reason that OG predators like Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein would never be held accountable, why not at least get something out of it? These men were surrounded by all sorts of enablers, skeptical cops, assistants who lured women into unsafe spaces, cowards who knew what was going on but didn't dare expose the person who signed their paycheck. In that scenario, it was not illogical for an abused woman to say, well, if I can't get justice for my pain, can I at least get a receipt, a coupon? But a lot has changed. Cosby and R. Kelly went to prison. Harvey Weinstein is going to die in prison. Larry Nassar is serving 175 years. Jeffrey Epstein was murdered in his jail cell by Hillary Clinton. Post-Me Too, reporting of sexual crimes is way up, as is the percent of women who say they're now more likely to speak out if victimized. And many states have changed laws, making it easier for victims to come forward. We're not in the no one listens to women or takes them seriously era anymore. Operators are actually standing by to take your calls. And I'm aware that it can be difficult to leave an abusive relationship. Most of what I watch on TV is the Lifetime channel. But this should be society's new grand bargain. We take every accusation seriously, but don't tell me any more about your contemporaneous account that you said to two friends 10 years ago. Tell the police right away. Don't wait a decade. Don't journal about it. Don't turn it into a one-woman show. And most importantly, don't keep fucking him. Your only contemporaneous notes about what he did should be the police report. It's not victim shaming to expect women to have the agency to leave toxic relationships. Quite the contrary, to not expect that is infantile.
Today was day 14 of the trial of Sean Diddy Combs and day 3 of the testimony of his former assistant going by the pseudonym Mia. And the defense took jabs at her accusations of multiple incidents of sexual assault by Combs during the course of her employment. But is the jury buying it? We'll discuss that today on Serving Justice. I'm criminal trial attorney, host of Serving Justice here on News Nation, where we're taking a deep dive on a special episode into the trial of Sean Diddy Combs for charges of racketeering and sex trafficking. Let's bring in News Nation reporter Sophia Samia Lee, who's following this trial very closely, and also Tommy Cristaldi, who's News Nation's field producer and is at the Manhattan courthouse where all the action is unfolding. You guys, thanks for joining tonight. Let me start with you, Tommy. Tell me about Mia's cross-examination, which I thought was really brutal when it started today.
Yeah, I would say things were brutal for sure. I think that's a good way of describing it. It was really interesting seeing how, especially during the direct examination last week, we saw the prosecutor very gentle in the way that she was questioning Mia, really taking some time to let her. She was struggling to answer some of these questions. The defense took a far more aggressive approach, outright asking her repeatedly if she was lying, saying, you made these things up, right? And to her credit, Mia stood her ground. She said, I have not told any lies in this courtroom. I have been completely honest, repeatedly denying allegations that she was in this for the money. I think really, if you want to talk about the flashpoint moment of today, the biggest thing that stood out to me. So I was in the overflow courtroom. That's, where extra members of the public and the media go, and it's just easier to get in and out of court and provide.
Well, also, I imagine you're not getting there at 3 a.m. to get in.
No, that is true. I got there at 8 o'clock this morning.
Right.
But so for me, the biggest moment, and one of the nice things about being in the overflow room as it pertains to understanding the reactions of obviously we don't see the jury, but you're allowed to make noise in there in a way that you're not in the main courtroom. And the moment when everybody gasped today was when Steele said, "Are you in this for the Me Too money cash grab?" accusing Mia essentially of just surfacing these allegations in order to turn a profit. And there was a gasp in the overflow room.
Here's the problem that I've had. One of the first questions that Steele asked her on cross-examination last week was that you met with the government 27 times. You guys, that's unheard of, right? If you have a story to tell, especially a story of sexual assault and rape, it doesn't take 27 meetings for that to come out. And apparently today, correct me if I'm wrong, she said that, she didn't call the police, fine, she didn't tell anybody, she didn't tell friends, and that it wasn't until she hired a lawyer that she even told the prosecutors and the agents. So I'm sorry, she's lying. Tell me what do you think, Sophia?
I mean, yes, you're right. She did say she didn't tell the police and she didn't tell her friends and she didn't take it to the HR department at the company. But and I think a lot of people can argue what you're saying is that, that tanks her credibility. But she's also spent the last 3 days talking about how she was scared, how she had a lot of fear, how she was threatened. She was scared for her safety. She talked about how this person had a hold on her career. She was young. She wanted to make it. This person held the keys to her career. She also said she signed an NDA. So she was potentially thinking, if I say something, am I violating this NDA? Am I going to get sued later down the line? I mean, I think that she has definitely talked about being confused, being fear. So I think there might be some jurors who could say like, okay, this woman may have been scared. I mean, she was scared at the time and there was some confusion that was going on. There were a lot of different things. So
but it takes both ways. But as you know, you're an attorney, it takes one juror, right? It takes one juror, and I think there's going to be more than one juror who's going to look at this woman and say, come on, because it's one thing while you're working for him and you have an NDA, and I think what she described it as was like he had a grip on her entire life. She couldn't do anything. It's like she had no freedom, she had no autonomy. She was afraid to do anything or say anything. But then she was confronted with numerous text messages and posts, by the way, social media posts, where after she left his employment, where she was severed, she made $400,000 after she was let go, and she was still expressing her love and admiration for Diddy. That's where I think she loses a lot of credibility.
So what I'll say to that is that, again, being in the overflow room, you kind of heard both perspectives. There were people after the cross-examination who thought that it was a slam dunk for the defense, that it was awesome, that she's definitely lying and that they've proven this. But, to many of the other people that I talked to, and honestly, the way that I interpreted it myself, and of course, I acknowledge you're both lawyers and I am not, this is just the way I saw things. It seems to me that her testimony was very much in line with what you would expect the survivor of abuse to say. She was consistent in everything that she said. Her story didn't waver. And yes, she did hesitate to come forward. She said about that, repeatedly said that it was very complex. And she said, I wrote down exactly what she said because it really stood out to me. She met with the government so much in order to understand her story because she was so terrified. And at the same time, she was learning how the things that happened to her were wrong. So what she's really saying is, she was no longer employed by him, but she still saw him as this public figure that people looked up to at the time and really admired. And she remembered that, for so long, this was her, as she said repeatedly, her whole world. And what I kind of took away from it was that, I thought that it was a much stronger approach to ask, why did it take you so much time to come forward, than to ask her if she was just in this for the money. I thought that was a little bit preposterous.
Well, I think that the money grab theme is definitely part of the defense here, right?
Sure.
Cassie got $20 million from him and then another $10 million from the hotel. Now, I'm not saying she doesn't deserve it. She definitely was abused, but it was domestic violence, right? And then she got $400,000 when she was let go. Some of it went to her lawyer, but some of it went to her. Dawn Richard, who was eviscerated, also sued or is suing and is going to eventually probably make something. So there's definitely this theme of a money grab, and maybe Steele shouldn't have gone so hard on her directly. He could have left it for argument, I agree. But it is definitely their theme. I think, though, when you think about, look, I've had some of the most complex federal cases, everything from, like right now I'm dealing with a crypto case, not analogous to this, but very, very complex. The most number of times I've seen anybody sit down with the government agents and the prosecutors is no more than 10. You know, you just tell your story. You don't keep going back. Oops, let me add this. Oops, I forgot this. Oops, me too. I forgot about rape. I forgot about a man forcing himself on top of me multiple times. That's just not, it just doesn't ring true. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
Sarah, she did say that she was planning on going to her grave with this. She didn't want to bring it up. She said she didn't want to talk about it. She didn't tell Cassie at the time. She said there was a lot of shame. There was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of fear. There were a lot of complex emotions that were tied into this. And she said as she met with them, the layers sort of started unpeeling and it started getting a little bit more and more. And then she started being able to talk. Look,
I'll tell you what I think. I'll tell you what my suspicion is. I think that there was probably sex or some sexual activity between Combs and her, but that it was consensual, just like it was with Cassie. And she's now making a case about, jumping on the Cassie bandwagon of being assaulted and being taken advantage of, being forced and coerced and all those things. But I do think that even listening to Steele's line of questioning on Friday when he asked, so you're not telling the truth here when you're saying this man forced himself on you this many times. It was just weird how he worded it. I suspect that there was sex, but the issue really is whether she was coerced or not,
I just think to that point, you see her the whole time. She's looking down, her bangs are in her eyes. She's very clearly struggling to get her words out. It didn't strike me immediately as something that somebody who was putting on an act. If she was acting, she's an incredible actress. She should pursue a career in the movies because it just...
She was running the film company, right?
Well,
she has some experience. But here's the thing. She was, and I wasn't there, so I want to know from you, Tommy. She was looking down and real sort of emotional and all those things on direct. But I heard that her disposition completely changed when Steele got up to cross-examine her. And that happens when somebody's not telling the truth.
I don't know that I would say that it completely changed. She still spent a majority of it, especially when she was being asked those more hard-hitting questions about the assaults that she alleges happened to her. She was still looking down. She was still nervous. When I did see her really look up and sort of take a stand, I think the only time today that I noticed her speaking with her hands at all was when she said, "I have not lied in this courtroom." And that was, for me, a really powerful moment. And it struck me as, again, I'm just one guy. I'm not the jury. It came across to me as like, this is a woman really being brave. And she mentioned that she was doing this so that she would be able to look her nieces in the eye and her goddaughters in the eye. And like that, she said, was the motivation behind this testimony. I found it moving. But again,
I also think that if you're telling the truth, you would not have a problem looking at the jury and being really firm about your answer. I think the fact that she just was, look, it could be because she's got shame and all of these things. It could also be because she's not telling the truth.
I think people present differently. It's a highly stressful situation. She's facing somebody that she's alleged assaulted her, harassed her, beat her, different things for the first time in years. She doesn't want to even be seen. I think obviously from a defense perspective, you see it as like, if you've got a story, you say it loud and proud. But I think that from a prosecution perspective, you could say that, it took her that long to even get to that point. She's now, and Tommy, you're talking about how like she looked like she was scared. Didn't at some point look like she was
She wasn't scared. But look, she wasn't scared to go after the $400,000, however much the demand was initially. She went to mediation for being severed from the employment that she thought was like life ending for her, instead of relief that she is essentially freed from this demon. She didn't have a problem suing or demanding money for that, but she got raped, and after she was gone and she had no ties with Diddy, she still didn't sue for the assault. None of that makes sense to me. But I also want to talk about the birthday video. I thought that was an important piece of evidence for the defense that almost didn't come in. Tommy, what was the reaction to that 44th birthday for Coombs, the video that she had made?
So unfortunately, one of our other producers was inside the court at the time. That was while I was stepping out to send over my notes. However, one thing that I did pick up on in her redirect examination was when she mentioned that she was not the only one who made one of these videos. It was part of her job description. And even within the video, the bottle of water that you see her drinking is a brand that Combs had invested in. Again, I can't speak to the reaction inside the courtroom, but I did talk to our other producer about that. And what he said to me was, it didn't seem like as big of a deal as he was expecting it to be. He would, with all the back and forth they had about, can we admit this, can we not? I think he was expecting it to be something of a smoking gun. And at least from what I heard, it was not.
Well, I think also, even if you take her words or allegations as true, it's not, again, I have a problem with her doing these things after her employment. Let's just say during her employment, there's the NDA, there's the code of silence, there's the fear, there's the coercion, there's all of those things, the blackmail, the forced labor and all those things. But what about afterwards? She's not promoting a product afterwards. She's still calling him her protector. I think it's really, this takes the Me Too sort of abuse victim thing to a whole other level to me, to where I've never seen, and I've had a lot of Me Too cases. I don't know. I just have a problem.
So and I think, Tommy, you wanted to get into this, but the whole money, the opportunist, right? The money part of it. Now, and Tommy, since you were there, she actually was asked point blank if she's planning on suing. Or a civil, right? And she's bringing a civil suit. She said no. And then she was asked point blank, are you expecting to make any money out of this? She said absolutely not.
Yeah, that's correct. She repeatedly said that she wasn't doing this for the money. She wasn't doing this for the money. There was something at one point where she said something along the lines of Steele asked her, have you had any discussion, you believe you'll be making money from testifying in this case? And her response was, no, that's not even a thing. Like and I'm not saying that it's not, I know that there are ways in which, but that seemed to me that was not the goal of hers. And she said that repeatedly today.
I guarantee you we're going to see some sort of a major interview or book or something from the real Mia at some point, now that she's out there, testifying. But I also thought for the defense, it was a very strong point to make about her resume. When she applied to work for Combs, and she provided a resume, she said that she has thick skin and works around the clock. That, to me, completely refuted that earlier testimony about essentially forced labor and how she was working around the clock and was rarely sleeping. What was the reaction to people in the courtroom to that?
Yeah, I think that, when she said that she had thick skin, one of the things that she mentioned was, Steele said, you have thick skin. And she said, I thought I did. And I think that, again, it's very much the case of, it depends on who you're asking within the courtroom. There are some people who were very much feeling like they were poking holes in her. And there were people that I spoke to that, again, this was just another example of somebody who thought that she was strong and thought she was capable of this and was thrown into a situation that she was not anticipating. I think that there is a difference between 24/7 availability and work for 5 days straight with no sleep. And I know that was just an allegation that she made, but I think that there are levels to this. And I think that depending on the appreciation of the differences in those levels within the courtroom, I think that kind of affects the way that people were responding.
I mean, I get it, Sophia, but I just have to think that I remember you covering this extensively during jury selection. The majority of the jurors are men, and this jury is very sophisticated, all things considered. They're all educated, they all have life experience. You cannot discount that. I think that at least a handful of these jurors are going to be like, girl, please.
Yes, that's the case. That's what defense attorneys are hoping for, right? Like defense attorneys are hoping for even just one person being like, girl, please, right? Like I think, yes, of course. And I think that's why prosecutors are trying to redirect, at least with this witness, they were trying to address some of those things that they saw as like coming across not great, coming across really weak for her, to try to explain it. And I think she did. Tommy, chime in, definitely. Like I think that when they asked her questions, for example, about social media posts, like she explained it. So it didn't seem like did it seem like she was walking back on anything?
No, I thought that she was remarkably consistent in what she said. I think that whether or not you believe that she genuinely felt that she couldn't speak up before now, and whether she genuinely had, pushed this down, never wanted to think about this ever again, whether you believe that is a question I cannot answer. But in terms of her story, as at least as much of it as I saw, was the same. She stuck to her points. She said these things happened. I didn't speak about them. I was under his grip. This was my whole world. I didn't know.
I was under his grip, and when he let the grip go, I was going to end my life. It was life-changing for me. I mean, listen, never discount the power of doubt. There's a lot of doubt already in this case. And the biggest issue I have, and I'm sure we've heard this throughout in the last week, is that the prosecution is far from making a racketeering case. They can bring in all this coercion, all the violence and all this stuff, but the dots are definitely not connected between existence of an enterprise, a conspiracy, and for it to be for the purpose of gratifying its mob boss, that being Combs. I don't know. I feel like there's a communication theory of primacy and recency that most trial lawyers follow, where we put our best evidence at the beginning and at the end. I'm like, there better be a grand finale here, because this, if I hear about baby oil one more time, I have had it. I've had it with Astroglide and baby oil and, a fear. I mean, it's just becoming more of the same with each witness, and they're not getting there. So I'm not sure if they're ever going to get there, but I also know President Trump is considering a pardon, so,
Anything can happen, I guess, at this point. Sarah, I wanted to ask you, since you're a trial attorney, their approach, the defense approach between Cassie, and granted Cassie was like about to give birth, she was like 9 months pregnant at the time, and the approach with this witness, Mia, it was, like Tommy said, very different. What did you think about this trial? I mean, is it good to go in hard and aggressive, or is there what's the strategy?
I think I it's funny you brought that up, because I said that when Cassie was testifying. I was like, this is great strategy to treat her with respect, to be soft on her, because remember, there was a different defense attorney that did her cross-examination. She handled her with care, and not just because she was pregnant, because she was definitely the victim of abuse. I mean, no doubt about that. It was on video, right? So I thought it was great strategy to treat her that way. But I said, they're not going to be treating the other accusers this way. And clearly they're not doing that with Mia. And that's because, what they're doing with Cassie is they're impeaching her credibility through other witnesses, as opposed to directly going hard on her on cross. With Mia, they can do it with other people, but they'll just go straight up on cross and eviscerate, which is what I think Steele is doing.
So you think this is a pretty good strategy, defensive?
I do. But I don't think they should have gone hard on Cassie. I think they did the right thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Tommy, for bringing us such great insight from inside the courtroom. And Sophia, as always, I'm so grateful for you. Your analysis is really important. And thanks for pushing back on me. I mean, we do need a prosecutor here, and you did a great job of being the prosecutor.
As many times as you said, Diddy. So if you do it all, is it enough, Wiggins?
I think it is enough. But I think what's interesting is I don't think that he was saying that. I think he was saying he didn't rape you at all. I think what he was trying to say in regards to her is the fact that he may have put his hands on you, he may have disrespected you, but he didn't rape you at all, is what he was saying.
Okay, so that's what you think he said. That's your interpretation, Mr. Wiggins, because his words were, isn't it true he didn't touch you or violate you as many times as you've told us? Those were his words. So my question to you, Armand Wiggins, is why are you sugarcoating it, airbrushing it? He said, quote, isn't it true he didn't touch you or violate you as many times as you've told us?
Now, I agree. I think that that's wrong. But I think the problem with Mia for me was, and here's the thing, I'm not victim shaming at all, but it seemed like her testimony was a little bit inconsistent because it seemed like she was more emotionally attached than traumatized, because when she had the out to actually leave, she was upset because she had got fired. She had then became suicidal because she had lost her job. And when he asked her, he said, hey, well, this is your time to actually leave now. Shouldn't you be happy? She was like, no, this wasn't a good time for me to, during that time, it wasn't a good time. So it was like, then she also said that she forgot how many times she would be abused. Like when the times were good, she would forget about the abuse. How do you forget about being
Okay, you know what?
abused?
I want to follow up on what you're saying, Armand Wiggins, because I vehemently disagree with you. But if you're thinking that, how do I know a juror isn't thinking that? Let's clarify. Straight out to Dr. Bethany Marshall joining us, renowned psychoanalyst out of LA, author of Deal Breaker. You can see her on Peacock or go to her website, drbethanymarshall.com. Dr. Bethany, okay. Number one, victims go through so much trauma, right? I don't know that Mia was suicidal because she got fired or let go. In fact, Sean Combs and his hench person, Corman, tried to get her to drop the lawsuit. And I want to point out regarding the lawsuit that he settled with her for $400,000. So I think we need to reframe the question, not why did you take money? Aren't you in it for the money? The question should be, Sean Combs, why are you paying $500,000 to get this woman to shut up? Like you paid Cassie Ventura $20 million to get her to shut up. So why are you paying people left and right so they don't talk about what you did to them? That's the right question.
And why aren't we talking about the time she did try to get away and he would try to call her or have his henchmen call her? And so she did attempt to get away. We can't forget about that. And women.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So we have with us Law and Crimes reporter Elizabeth Milner, who has been inside that courtroom for every day of testimony and things that are not even testimony related, including an outburst today, and apparently someone getting banned from court. Elizabeth, it's good to see you. Let's start with what happened here. So you're in court. What did somebody say? And also, I understand somebody else is now banned from being in that courtroom. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, so Jesse, this happened first thing this morning. It was outside of the presence of the jury. We were actually talking, or not we, as far as the press is going, but the arguments were about Mia's testimony and possibly introducing some jail calls. So I was listening, taking notes, and then all of a sudden I'm hearing screaming going on. And it's from a woman who we've been kind of noticing has been causing a couple of troubles here and there, just as far as court goes. She was removed from the overflow room during jury selection, and she was removed from the main courtroom today during these arguments. And so I'm writing down my notes, I'm jotting everything down, but even just the backstory of this particular woman, we in the press have been referring to her as the MTA lady. It's not necessarily confirmed whether or not she actually works for MTA, but she always kind of comes in with an MTA jacket, and that's how we kind of have remembered her. So I'm just going to give you guys the low that we had kind of had bets with amongst us in the press just about how long it would take before something like this were to happen again, because we were thinking that she would cause trouble just right off the bat. And then lo and behold, it didn't take very long for her to kind of stir up some trouble and for the marshals to escort her out. So from what I heard, it was just cussing, it was yelling, mainly from her. And then I saw just 4 marshals just try to grab her. She was saying things along the lines of, oh, use your gun against me, that type of thing. And she was threatened, I believe, with the taser, but that didn't happen. We didn't see any of that. And so from our understanding is after this incident, after kind of the marshals escorted her outside of the courtroom. As far as what was going on inside for the judge, he went back to business as usual. But from my understanding, she was just kind of dismissed from the courthouse altogether, and likely won't be able to come back in, and likely won't be able to come back in the courtroom too. But even as far as just the incident of somebody revealing Mia's true identity and I guess saying this over a live stream or in a video, that type of thing, that was also brought up shortly after the incident of the woman having the outburst inside the courtroom today. And so what we did learn about that, it was somebody who was actually sitting on our side of the press, not with a NYC verified press credential, nothing like that. But what it's been kind of alleged is that it was somebody sitting on our side who kind of works for a blog or a media outlet, that type of thing, and that after court yesterday was doing this video, doing this live stream, and was essentially talking about Mia and wasn't referring to Mia as her pseudonym, was instead referring to Mia as her true identity. And so what AUSA Emily Johnson discussed with the judge today is that she didn't see this individual inside the courtroom today, so there was no further, I guess, talk about what was to happen next. But if this person were to show up once again, then they'll definitely not be allowed back into the courtroom, and I doubt even into the overflow room at this point either.
Well, Elizabeth, that is quite a way to start the day. And let me tell you something. We just got a super chat comment from Donnie Z TV. Great reporting, Elizabeth Milner. So there you go. So you got a bunch of fans online. But talking about that, talk to me real quick, because I know you have to head back into court in a little bit. Eddie Garcia takes the stand. Now, you and I talked about him yesterday, because yesterday he was intending to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. You know, ears perk up. What's he going to say? What did he do wrong? And he was granted immunity to testify. So this former security guard from the Intercontinental Hotel, what were the highlights of his testimony?
Well, I thought Eddie Garcia had a lot of highlighted moments during his testimony. So yes, we did see him invoke his Fifth Amendment right as far as self-incrimination goes, just yesterday. And then we saw him actually take the stand today. And so he was questioned by AUSA Mitzi Steiner. And so the basis, or the kind of the meat of his testimony, had to kind of be surrounded by what had happened on March 5th of 2016. Anyone who has been following this case knows that that was the exact day of the Intercontinental Hotel incident. And so what we learned from Eddie Garcia is that he is now 33 years old. However, at the time that this incident occurred, he was just 24 years old. He was working for Securitas, who we kind of know a little bit about from Officer Israel Flores' testimony, who was one of the first witnesses called by the government to testify essentially against Sean Combs, aka Diddy. So we were learning just about who the director of security was, and that was a man named Bill Medrano. The assistant director of security was Officer Israel Flores. And so Eddie Garcia was talking about how he's still friends with Israel Flores, saw him a couple weeks ago, but they didn't talk about the substance of their testimony. But Garcia said he saw a TikTok about his testimony, so I thought that part was interesting. So we see an exhibit photo of the employee sign-in sheet, where you see on the day of this incident that we see Eddie had worked from 2 p.m. till 1:30 in the morning. And so we saw some extra overtime because he normally gets off at 10 p.m. But instead on that day, he got off at 1:30 in the morning. And so he was saying after this incident occurred that we know from Officer Israel Flores' testimony that Diddy was kind of trying to buy his way out of this, trying to say like, hey, I got some money, can you make this go away? But then from Eddie Garcia's perspective, he said he got a phone call from somebody, and it wasn't necessarily Diddy at first, but we
On the map now to New York City, where it is the fourth week of the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. The music mogul has pleaded not guilty to federal charges. On the map now to New York City, where it is the fourth week of the Sean Combs sex trafficking trial. The music mogul has pleaded not guilty to federal charges against him.